I was only 19 when I joined the army. Back then, I thought war looked like the movies. Loud helicopters, proud soldiers, heroic speeches, flags waving in slow motion. I thought joining the military would finally turn me into someone important. Someone strong. Someone my father would have respected before he walked out of our house in Dallas when I was 13. But the truth was, I was just a scared kid pretending not to be afraid. The first weeks of training nearly destroyed me. My body hurt every second of the day. My drill sergeant screamed like he enjoyed watching us suffer. Half the guys in my unit cried secretly at night even if they acted tough during the day. Nobody wanted to admit it, but most of us were boys trying to become men too fast. I remember standing outside the barracks one cold evening, staring at the sunset over the training grounds, thinking about how strange life was. Just 6 months earlier, I'd been working part-time at a gas station, worrying about rent and college applications. Now I was carrying rifles and learning how to kill people. Then the air war started. Nobody expected it to happen that fast. One morning alarms suddenly rang across the entire base. Officers started running everywhere. TVs inside the cafeteria showed breaking news about escalating conflict between America and Iran. Explosions, fighter jets, missiles lighting up the sky. The room went silent. Every soldier stopped eating. Some looked excited. Some looked terrified. I think I felt both. Later that night, our commanding officer gathered us inside a briefing room. His voice was calm, but his eyes looked different. Serious. Heavy. "Listen carefully," he said. "There's a strong possibility this conflict escalates beyond air operations. If that happens, some of you may be deployed into active ground combat." Ground combat. Hearing those words made my stomach twist. I remember lying awake in my bunk that night listening to the sounds of other soldiers breathing in the darkness. Nobody talked. Nobody joked around anymore. The entire base felt haunted after that. For the next 15 days, the war stayed in the sky. Every television showed explosions over deserts and mountains. Fighter jets disappeared into smoke. Reporters talked about retaliation, uranium facilities, military alliances, secret operations. Every day the tension grew worse. Then our unit got selected for something classified. I still remember the exact moment. For black SUVs rolled onto base just after midnight. Men in suits stepped out carrying folders marked confidential. They called our names one by one. Mine was on the list. That scared me more than anything. Inside the briefing room, they explained our mission. We were being sent toward Afghanistan first. From there, our squad would secretly move closer to Iranian territory to recover intelligence connected to hidden uranium storage facilities. Nobody asked questions. You don't ask questions during classified military operations. You just obey. 3 days later, we landed in Afghanistan under complete secrecy. I expected ruins, gunfire, chaos. Instead, what shocked me most was how quiet everything felt. The mountains looked endless beneath the moonlight. Cold winds swept through the valleys. Armed men surrounded our convoy as we traveled deeper into Taliban-controlled territory. But strangely, nobody treated us like enemies. In fact, they treated us like honored guests. Our officers called it temporary strategic cooperation, but it still felt unreal seeing American soldiers being escorted by Taliban fighters through heavily guarded compounds. When we arrived at the main fortress-like compound where we'd stay temporarily, I noticed him immediately. He stood near the entrance surrounded by armed guards, taller than everyone else around him. Commander Zahir Rahmani. Even now, I can still remember the first time I saw his eyes. Blue. Not normal blue either. Cold blue. Dangerous blue. The kind of eyes that looked like they could see through every lie you ever told. He looked to be around 50, maybe older. Thick black hair reached his shoulders. His beard was long and dark with small streaks of gray. Heavy boots crushed against the dirt as he walked toward us with slow confidence. Every soldier in my squad became tense around him. But for some reason, I couldn't stop staring. And worse, he kept staring back. Not aggressively, not angrily, just intensely, like he was studying me, like he already knew something about me I didn't even understand myself. That night, we all sat together for dinner inside a massive candlelit room guarded by armed fighters. I barely touched my food because every time I looked up, Commander Zahir was already watching me from across the table. At one point our eyes locked for several seconds too long. I quickly looked away, but my heart wouldn't calm down after that. I hated how nervous he made me feel. One of the older soldiers beside me whispered jokingly, "Careful, Walker. That guy looks like he wants to adopt you." Everyone laughed, except Zahir. He just kept looking at me with that unreadable expression. Later that night, one of the Taliban guards escorted me to my sleeping quarters. The hallway was dimly lit, silent except for distant footsteps echoing through the compound. My room sat at the very end of the corridor. The guard opened the door and gave me a strange smile before leaving. At first everything looked normal. Small bed, wooden table, one lantern glowing softly near the wall. But then I noticed something strange. Another door. Inside my room. I walked toward it slowly. Locked. My pulse quickened for some reason I couldn't explain. A few minutes later I heard movement on the other side. Then silence. Then very soft footsteps. I suddenly realized that door probably connected to another private room. And somehow, deep down, I already knew whose room it was. I sat on the edge of my bed trying to calm myself down. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe exhaustion was messing with my head. But then came the sound that changed everything. 3 soft knocks. Slow, careful, intentional. My entire body froze as I stared at the hidden door in the darkness. I kept staring at the hidden door while my heart pounded so hard I thought whoever stood on the other side could hear it. Another knock came. Slower this time. I should have ignored it. I should have stayed in bed and pretended to be asleep like a smart soldier would have done. But something inside me already knew I was going to open that door the moment I heard the first knock. I stood up carefully and walked across the room. My hands actually trembled as I unlocked it. The door opened only slightly at first. Then I saw him. Commander Zahir stood there silently in the dim lantern light, filling the doorway with his massive frame. Up close he looked even more intimidating. His shoulders were broad enough to block the hallway behind him, and those icy blue eyes locked onto mine instantly. For a second neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt dangerous. Then his deep voice finally broke it. "You were nervous all night." I swallowed hard. "You kept staring at me." A faint smile appeared beneath his beard. "And you kept staring back." I didn't know what to say after that. My body was tense, but not from fear anymore. It was something stranger, something warmer. I'd never felt anything like it before. Zahir stepped inside quietly and closed the hidden door behind him. The soft click echoed through the room. I suddenly became very aware that nobody knew he was there. Nobody could know. "You should not trust me," he said calmly. "But I do." The words escaped my mouth before I could stop them. For the first time since meeting him, his expression softened. Not like a commander, not like a soldier, just like a man who'd been lonely for a very long time. That first night we mostly talked. I expected someone like him to be cold or aggressive, but instead he spoke quietly, almost carefully, like every word mattered. He asked about America, about my life before the army, about my family. I don't know why, but I told him things I'd never told anyone. I told him about my father leaving, about feeling invisible most of my life, about joining the military because I wanted somewhere to belong. He listened to every word without interrupting. Then eventually I asked him something. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" For a moment he said nothing. Then he answered honestly, "Because you look at me without hate." That hit me harder than I expected. Outside the compound he was feared by hundreds of armed men. Inside military reports he was probably described as dangerous, ruthless, terrifying. But sitting there beside me in the lantern light, he just looked tired. That night before leaving, he gently touched my wrist for the first time. The contact sent electricity through my entire body. "I should go," he whispered, but neither of us moved for several seconds. Eventually he disappeared back through the hidden door, leaving me sitting there unable to breathe normally. I barely slept at all. The next day everything felt different. Every glance between us carried secret meaning now. At breakfast he sat across from me again, surrounded by armed guards, acting calm and composed like nothing had happened. But under the table, his boot brushed lightly against mine once. Nobody noticed except me, and that tiny moment drove me insane all day. Later, during a security patrol around the compound, I caught several Taliban fighters staring at me strangely whenever Zahir walked near me. One of the American soldiers in my squad even joked that the commander seemed unusually protective of me. He wasn't wrong. Whenever we traveled between checkpoints, Zahir always positioned himself close to me. Whenever local fighters got too aggressive or loud, his eyes instantly searched for me first. And every single time our eyes met, that same tension returned. That second night he came later than before. I was already awake waiting for him. The moment the hidden door opened, I realized something had changed. He looked tense, angry. "There are rumors," he said quietly. My stomach tightened. "About what?" "About you." Fear shot through me instantly. But then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "They think I favor you too much." The room suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. I should have been terrified. Instead, all I could think about was the fact he'd risked coming anyway. "You shouldn't be here then," I whispered. His eyes locked onto mine again. "And yet I came." God, the way he said it, like he couldn't stay away even if he tried. That night, the distance between us finally disappeared completely. He sat beside me on the bed, close enough that I could feel his body heat. His rough hand brushed slowly against mine before our fingers intertwined naturally. I remember how strange it felt. This powerful older man everyone feared touching me so gently, like I was something fragile, something important. "You are too young for this war," he said softly. I laughed nervously. "I'm a soldier." "No," he replied immediately. "You are still someone innocent pretending to be a soldier." I looked away after that because somehow he saw through me too easily. Then he told me something I never expected. "When I was younger," he said quietly, "I once believed I could live honestly. But men like me do not survive openly here." I turned toward him slowly. For the first time, I truly understood what he meant. All those years, all that loneliness, all that hiding. And suddenly this wasn't just attraction anymore. This was two people finding something forbidden inside a place built on violence and secrets. That night he kissed me for the first time. Slowly, carefully, like he was terrified I'd disappear afterward. I still remember his hands trembling slightly despite how powerful he looked everywhere else. And honestly, mine were trembling too. The third day became torture. Now every moment apart felt unbearable. I caught myself searching for him constantly during meetings, patrols, meals, everywhere. And he did the same. But danger was growing around us. One American soldier named Carter started watching me suspiciously. He kept asking why the commander treated me differently. Even worse, one Taliban guard glared at us constantly whenever we were near each other. It felt like the walls around us were slowly closing in. That final night, rain poured heavily over the compound. Thunder echoed through the mountains while soldiers rushed between buildings outside. Then the emergency recall order arrived. Mission canceled. Immediate return to America. My chest literally hurt reading those words. I found Zahir waiting inside my room later that night, standing silently near the window while rainwater rolled down the glass behind him. For once he looked completely lost. "You are leaving," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I stepped closer slowly. "I have to." His jaw tightened. "No." The way he said that word nearly broke me. "You don't understand," I whispered desperately. "If I stay, they'll suspect you. They could kill you." "I do not care." "But I care." The room fell silent after I shouted that. We stared at each other while thunder shook the mountains outside. Then finally I moved closer and grabbed his hands. "I swear to you," I whispered, "I'll come back." He looked at me like he wanted to believe me but didn't know how. Then suddenly he pulled me against him so tightly I could feel his heartbeat pounding through his chest. Neither of us spoke after that. We just held onto each other like time itself was running out. Hours later, While he slept briefly beside me, I noticed movement outside through the rain-covered window. Several armed men stood far beyond the compound walls, watching the building silently. Watching his building. And in that moment, I realized our secret was far more dangerous than either of us understood. The flight back to America felt longer than the entire war. I sat quietly inside the military transport plane while the other soldiers laughed, slept, or celebrated surviving the mission. Some talked about burgers, girlfriends, alcohol, and finally getting home. I couldn't relate to any of it anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Zahir, standing in the rain. Zahir looking at me like I was the only thing keeping him alive. Zahir whispering, "No," when I told him I had to leave. And worst of all, I remembered the armed men outside the compound watching us that final night. Something had been wrong, deeply wrong. But before I could figure it out, we were already gone. Back in Washington, everything became strangely cold again. Bright military hallways, officers barking orders, endless paperwork. It felt like I'd returned to a machine that didn't care whether people lived or died as long as missions were completed. I tried forcing myself to move on. I really did. But every night I found myself staring at the hidden numbers Zahir secretly gave me before we separated. I never called it because I knew how dangerous that could be. Still, I kept staring at it. Like maybe somehow that tiny piece of paper connected us. Weeks passed. Then the nightmares started. At first it was only flashes. Gunfire, burning buildings, blue eyes disappearing into smoke. Then one night I woke up sweating after dreaming about Zahir lying dead beneath rubble while men dragged me away screaming. That dream messed me up badly. The next morning during routine briefing, I overheard two intelligence officers talking quietly outside a conference room. Entire compound wiped out. Collateral damage. Taliban commander eliminated. I froze instantly. Every sound around me disappeared. My blood turned cold. The moment briefing ended, I started digging for answers. Officially, soldiers like me weren't allowed access to classified operation reports. But I didn't care anymore. Something inside me already knew the truth before I even found it. 3 nights later, I secretly entered a restricted intel office with help from another young soldier named Mason. He owed me after I'd covered for him during training months earlier. "You better know what you're doing," he whispered nervously while hacking security access. "I don't," I admitted. The classified files opened slowly across the screen. And then my entire world shattered. Satellite images showed multiple missile strikes directly targeting compounds connected to Zahir's region only 2 days after our extraction. Entire villages burned. Dozens dead. Maybe hundreds. My hands shook violently as I scrolled through the reports. Then I saw the worst part. The coordinates had been leaked intentionally. By someone inside our own command. I stared at the officer's authorization signature at the bottom of the report.
Colonel Richard.
The same man who shook our hands after mission briefings. The same man who called civilian deaths acceptable outcomes. That monster sold out everyone for political advantage. The uranium mission had been a lie from the beginning. Our deployment wasn't about peace or security. It was about triggering chaos quietly while governments blamed each other publicly. And Zahir had been sacrificed like he meant nothing. Couldn't breathe. Mason grabbed my shoulder nervously. "Ethan, we need to go." But I kept staring at the screen, at the destruction, at the photographs. Then suddenly one image appeared that nearly broke me completely. Zahir's compound, destroyed, covered in smoke and rubble.
No survivor confirmation.
No body recovered. I felt physically sick. For the next several days I stopped functioning normally. I barely slept, barely ate. Every second my mind replayed those 3 nights over and over again. I kept imagining him buried beneath the ruins, alone. And the worst part? I never even got to say goodbye properly. That's when grief turned into anger.
Pure anger.
I stopped caring about rules after that. If Colonel Hayes destroyed innocent people for power, then I was going to destroy him back. Mason thought I'd lost my mind when I told him my plan. "You seriously want to leak classified military intel?" he whispered. "I want the truth exposed." You'll go to prison. Maybe. You'll destroy your life. I looked him directly in the eyes. My life was destroyed the moment they killed him. After that, there was no turning back. For nearly 2 weeks, we secretly copied files, operation logs, satellite records, encrypted communications, everything connected to the mission. Every file revealed worse corruption, civilian casualties hidden, false reports manufactured, political manipulation, illegal airstrikes, and every trail led back to Colonel Hayes. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous things became. I started noticing military police watching me during base movements. My room got searched twice. Officers questioned me randomly about Afghanistan. Someone knew. One night, while returning to my barracks, an unmarked black SUV slowly followed me for nearly 3 blocks before disappearing. I barely slept after that. Then everything changed again. At 2:14 a.m., my burner phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something inside me forced me to answer. There was silence at first. Then breathing. Heavy breathing. And then, Ethan. I nearly dropped the phone. My entire body froze. It was him. I knew his voice instantly. Zahir? My voice cracked badly. Oh my God. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear pain in his breathing. Weakness. But alive. He was alive. They attacked us, he whispered. Many died. Tears filled my eyes instantly. I thought you were dead. So did they. I sat down against the wall, shaking uncontrollably while hearing his voice again after weeks of believing he was gone forever. You're hurt? I asked. Yes. Badly? A pause. Not enough to stop loving you. That completely destroyed me. I started crying right there on the floor like a damn child. I didn't even care anymore. Then Zahir told me the truth. Someone inside Taliban leadership discovered our relationship after the mission ended. At the same time, the American leak triggered missile strikes across multiple compounds. Chaos erupted everywhere. But despite torture and interrogation, Zahir never exposed me. Not once. I protected your name, he whispered weakly. Even when they demanded it. I covered my face, trying not to break apart emotionally. Why would someone risk so much for me? We talked nearly 2 hours that night. And by the end of the call, we made a decision together. If governments wanted to treat innocent people like disposable pieces in their games, then we would burn their lies to the ground. The next week became absolute chaos. Through encrypted channels, we leaked classified evidence to journalists, independent investigators, and international media outlets simultaneously. The reaction exploded worldwide. News stations began exposing illegal operations. Civilian casualty cover-ups surfaced publicly. Colonel Hayes' face suddenly appeared everywhere across television broadcasts while politicians denied involvement. Then came the investigations, the hearings, the panic. Military command started tearing itself apart, trying to contain the scandal. And meanwhile, I became their next target. Military police raided my barracks. My access got revoked. Friends stopped answering my calls. Officially, I wasn't arrested yet. Unofficially, they were hunting me. Then one final encrypted message arrived from Zahir. 3 simple words. Come find me. I stared at the screen for nearly an hour. America wanted me silenced. Taliban factions wanted Zahir dead. Every logical part of my brain screamed not to go. But none of that mattered anymore. Because somewhere across the world, the man I loved was still waiting for me. 3 days later, I disappeared from America without telling anyone.
No goodbye.
No warning. Just a backpack, fake documents provided through one of Zahir's contacts, and a one-way route through countries I'd never even imagined visiting before all this began. Every airport felt dangerous. Every stranger looked suspicious. More than once I thought military agents were following me. But fear stopped mattering the moment I stepped onto Afghan soil again. The air smelled exactly the same as before. Cold dust, smoke, mountain wind. But this time I wasn't arriving as a soldier. I was arriving as someone chasing the only person who ever truly made me feel loved. One of Zahir's trusted men met me near an abandoned roadside market at sunset. He barely spoke during the drive through the mountains. The roads were rough and empty, surrounded by endless cliffs and silence. The deeper we traveled, the more nervous I became. What if this was a trap? What if I was too late? What if he changed his mind? But then the vehicle finally stopped near a narrow mountain ridge just before sunrise. And there he was, standing alone beside the cliffs. Commander Zahir Rahmani. The cold morning wind moved through his long dark hair while the first sunlight touched the mountains behind him. He looked thinner than before, older somehow. A scar now crossed part of his face near his eye. But to me, he still looked like the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. For several seconds, neither of us moved. After everything that happened, it almost didn't feel real anymore. Then suddenly he started walking toward me fast. And the moment he reached me, he pulled me into his arms so tightly I could barely breathe. I held on to him just as hard. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. That embrace said everything. You survived. You came back. You chose me. When he finally pulled away, I noticed tears in his eyes for the first time. Not fear. Not weakness. Just relief. I thought they would stop you, he whispered. I told you I'd come back. He touched my face gently like he still couldn't believe I was standing there alive. Then his expression darkened slightly. We cannot stay here long. That reality hit immediately. The world still wanted us apart. American intelligence considered me a traitor after the leaks. Taliban factions suspected Zahir after the attacks and internal betrayals. We both had enemies now. People with guns. People with power. People who would kill us if they found us together. But somehow, standing beside him again made me feel less afraid of all of it. Over the next several days we moved constantly through remote villages and hidden mountain routes while Zahir's remaining loyal men protected us quietly. Those nights felt strangely peaceful despite the danger. Sometimes we sat beside small fires under the stars while he told me stories about his childhood before war consumed everything around him. Other times we simply stayed silent together. And honestly, those silent moments became my favorite part. Because for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel lonely. One night while resting inside an abandoned cabin, I woke up suddenly after hearing distant vehicles outside. Zahir instantly grabbed his rifle and moved toward the window. His entire body became tense. Headlights moved across the mountains below us. Search teams. Looking for someone. Looking for us. I remember my heart pounding violently while armed voices echoed in the darkness outside. For a moment, I truly thought it was over. Zahir looked back at me calmly and whispered, "If they come inside, stay behind me." That broke something inside my chest. Even now, even after everything, his first instinct was still protecting me. The search vehicles eventually passed without stopping, but after that we knew we were running out of time. 2 days later, one of Zahir's contacts arranged false identities and an escape route through Europe. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it was our only chance. The border crossing nearly failed. At one checkpoint, an armed officer kept staring at my passport too long, while another questioned Zahir aggressively in a language I barely understood. Sweat rolled down my neck the entire time. One wrong word and we were dead. Then finally the guard handed our documents back and waved us through. I didn't breathe properly again until hours later. The moment our train crossed safely into the next country, Zahir quietly reached for my hand beneath the table. That tiny gesture somehow felt bigger than surviving the war itself. Months later, we settled near the coast outside Lisbon under new identities. Far away from soldiers, far away from governments, far away from war. Life there felt unreal at first. Peaceful mornings, ocean air, small cafes.
No gunfire.
No hiding in dark rooms waiting for someone to kick the door down. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night expecting explosions or alarms. But instead I'd find Zahir asleep beside me peacefully, his arm wrapped around my chest like he was afraid I might disappear. And every single time,
Ides Mila.
the world spent years teaching us we were enemies. American soldier, Taliban commander, two people never supposed to care about each other. But the world was wrong, because beneath all the politics, violence, propaganda, and hate. We were just two lonely men who found love in the middle of a war. Years later, sometimes people still ask me if I regret choosing him over everything else. Over my military career, over my country, over the life I used to have. And my answer always stays the same. No, because countries can replace soldiers. Governments can rewrite history. Wars eventually end. But finding someone who sees your soul clearly and still chooses to love you anyway? That almost never happens. This morning I woke up beside him again with sunlight pouring through our bedroom window overlooking the sea. His beard now has more gray in it than before. And I still think he's the most beautiful man alive. Sometimes he catches me staring at him and laughs softly. The same way he did that first night behind the hidden door. And every time he smiles at me like that, I remember exactly why I crossed the world to come back to him. Because the world called him my enemy. But he was the first person who ever made me feel safe enough to love without fear. And if you had to choose between your country or the only person who ever truly loved you, what would you choose?